The certified letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in February, and I knew it was trouble before I even opened it because nothing good ever comes certified from the Meadowbrook Heights Homeowners Association. My name is Xavier Lawson, and I had been living in my property on the outskirts of Rapid City, South Dakota, for 8 years without major incident. I bought the place specifically because it was on the edge of the development, with 20 acres of land that gave me breathing room from my neighbors. The previous owner, an old farmer named Dutch, had planted rows of evergreen trees decades ago as windbreaks. These trees stood tall and thick along the northern and western boundaries of my property, shielding not just my land but also the houses behind me from the brutal winter winds that screamed across the plains. I tore open the letter and felt my blood pressure spike as I read the contents. The HOA was fining me $1,500 for excessive and unsightly snow accumulation on my property. According to Board President Patricia Morrison, the snowdrifts visible from the main road violated Section 12.4 of the Community Guidelines regarding property maintenance and curb appeal. I walked to my front window and looked out at my land. Yes, there were snowdrifts. It was South Dakota in February. We had gotten 14 inches of snow in the past week alone, with winds strong enough to reshape the landscape overnight. The drifts on my property were natural accumulations, pushed up against the southern fence line by the wind. They were not blocking any roads, not interfering with anyone's access, and certainly not my fault. I grabbed my phone and called the HOA office. A cheerful voice answered. "Meadowbrook Heights HOA, this is Jennifer speaking. This is Xavier Lawson. I just received a fine for snow on my property, and I need to speak with Patricia Morrison immediately." "Oh, Mr. Lawson. Yes, Mrs. Morrison mentioned you might be calling. She's not available right now, but I can schedule a callback, or you can attend Thursday's board meeting to discuss your concern." "My concern is that this fine is ridiculous. It snowed. Snowdrifts. That's what happens in South Dakota winters." "I understand your frustration, Mr. Lawson, but the community guidelines are quite clear about property maintenance. The guidelines say I need to keep my driveway and walkways clear, which I do. They say nothing about controlling weather patterns and wind." Jennifer's voice took on a practiced, sympathetic tone that made my teeth grind. "The board meeting is Thursday at 7 p.m. at the community center. You're welcome to present your case then." I hung up and reread the letter. The fine was due within 30 days, and failure to pay would result in additional penalties and possible legal action. I had bought into this HOA reluctantly, but the property had been too perfect to pass up. Now, I was regretting that decision. Thursday evening came with another bout of snow. I drove through the quiet streets of Meadowbrook Heights, past the neat rows of similar houses with their perfect lawns buried under white blankets. The community center was a modern building near the front entrance of the development, all glass and blonde wood. Inside, about 15 people sat in folding chairs facing a long table where 5 board members sat. Patricia Morrison was easy to spot. She was a woman in her late 40s with an aggressively styled blonde bob and the kind of smile that never reached her eyes. She wore a burgundy blazer that screamed, "I need to speak to your manager," and had a stack of folders arranged precisely in front of her. I took a seat in the back and waded through 20 minutes of mind-numbing discussion about playground equipment and landscaping contracts. Finally, Patricia looked up and scanned the room. "I see we have Mr. Lawson here tonight. Xavier, would you like to address the board about your recent fine?" I stood and moved to the front. "Yes, I would. I received a $1,500 fine for snow drifts on my property. Natural snow drifts from the storm last week. I'm not sure what you expect me to do about weather." Patricia's smile never wavered. "Mr. Lawson, the issue isn't the weather. It's the appearance of your property. Several neighbors have complained that the excessive snow accumulation is unsightly and reflects poorly on our community." Several neighbors. Which neighbors? The ones who live a quarter-mile away and can barely see my property. A man to Patricia's right, whose nameplate read Donald Hughes, leaned forward. "Mr. Lawson, your property is visible from Ridge Road, which is one of the main thoroughfares through our community. The curb appeal standards apply to all properties, regardless of size or location." "Curb appeal standards for snow? Are you serious right now?" Patricia's voice took on a harder edge. "Mr. Lawson, your tone is not helpful. We're trying to maintain property values for everyone in Meadowbrook Heights. When one property looks neglected, it affects us all." "Neglected?" "My property has natural snowdrifts like every other piece of land in South Dakota right now. The difference is my lot is 20 acres, so there's more space for snow to accumulate. That's not neglect, that's geography." "The board has made its decision," Patricia said. "You have 30 days to pay the fine. If you believe the fine is unjust, you can file a formal appeal, which requires a $500 processing fee." I stared at her. "You want me to pay $500 for the privilege of arguing about a bogus $1,500 fine?" "Those are the procedures outlined in the community guidelines you agreed to when you purchased your property. Now, if there's nothing else, we need to move on to other business." I left the meeting furious. The cold air outside did nothing to cool my temper. I sat in my truck for several minutes, gripping the steering wheel and trying to think rationally. Then something occurred to me. Those windbreak trees on my property, they did more than just protect my land. They were the primary barrier between the open plains to the west and north and the houses that sat behind me on Maple Street and Oak Avenue. Without those trees, every winter storm would slam directly into about 30 homes. For 8 years, I had maintained those trees. I had trimmed dead branches, treated them for disease, and even planted new saplings to fill in gaps. It was expensive and time-consuming work, but I did it because Dutch had asked me to when I bought the place. He had made me promise to keep up the windbreaks because the people who built Meadowbrook Heights had been stupid enough to put houses in the direct path of prairie winds. But those trees were on my property. My 20 acres that were apparently such an eyesore to the HOA. If they wanted to fine me for how my property looked, maybe I should stop putting in the effort to maintain it. I drove home and spent the weekend researching. The trees were entirely on my land, a good 50 feet inside my property line. I had no legal obligation to maintain them. The HOA guidelines said nothing about preserving windbreaks or protecting neighbors from weather. In fact, the more I read through the lengthy community guidelines document, the more I realized they focused almost entirely on visible aesthetics. Lawn length, exterior paint colors, holiday decoration timelines. Monday morning, I called a lawyer named Tom Chen who had helped me with my property purchase years ago. "Xavier, good to hear from you. What's going on?" I explained the situation. Tom listened quietly, then asked me to email him the fine letter and relevant sections of the HOA guidelines. "Give me a couple days to review everything," he said. "But off the top of my head, you're right that this seems like overreach. Natural snow accumulation isn't something most HOAs can fine for, especially on a large rural property. What if I stopped maintaining the windbreak trees on my land?" There was a pause. "The trees you own on your property?" "Yes." "Then that's entirely your decision. If they're not protected by any easement or conservation agreement and they're solely on your land, you can do whatever you want with them, including nothing. even if it affects my neighbors. Xavier, I'm not going to tell you to do something out of spite, but legally speaking, you have no obligation to maintain trees for your neighbor's benefit. Just don't do anything actively destructive that could be seen as creating a hazard. I thanked him and hung up. Then I went outside and looked at the rows of evergreens marching along my northern and western boundaries. They were beautiful trees, dense and healthy. It had taken decades for them to grow to their current height of 30 to 40 feet. Dutch had planted them knowing he would never see them reach full maturity. He had done it for future generations. But Patricia Morrison and her HOA board did not care about my property or my efforts. They wanted to fine me for snow. I would pay their fine. And then I would stop doing free work for people who did not appreciate it. The next day, I went to the HOA office and paid the $1,500 in person. Jennifer looked surprised to see me. "Mr. Lawson, you could have mailed this." I wanted to make sure there was no confusion. "I'm paying under protest, but I'm paying. Please make a note that I consider this fine unjust and ridiculous." "I'll note that you paid. I can't really put ridiculous in the official record." "Sure you can. It's an accurate description." I left and went home. Then I made a list of all the maintenance work I had been doing on the windbreak trees. There was quite a bit. I had a contract with a tree service that came out twice a year for trimming and health assessments. I had a treatment program for pine beetles that cost me nearly $2,000 annually. I had irrigation lines running to the newer saplings to help them establish. I canceled everything. The tree service called me back, concerned. "Mr. Lawson, we're scheduled for your spring maintenance in 6 weeks. Are you sure you want to cancel?" "Completely sure. Those trees are going to need attention. We noted some signs of beetle damage in the northern section last fall." "I appreciate the concern, but I'm done investing money in those trees." I could hear the confusion in his voice, but he processed the cancellation without further argument. Over the next few days, I systematically shut down all the maintenance programs. The trees would not die immediately, but they would start to decline. Dead branches would accumulate. Disease would spread unchecked. In a few years, they would become much less effective as wind barriers. February turned to March. The snow began to melt. I cleared my driveway and walkways diligently, making sure the HOA had no legitimate complaints about my property maintenance. But I did nothing about the snowdrifts on my open land. They would melt in their own time. One afternoon, my neighbor from 2 properties over, a man named Gary, stopped by. Gary lived on Maple Street, one of the roads that benefited from my windbreak. "Hey, Xavier, I wanted to thank you for keeping up those trees. We barely got any wind damage this winter, unlike the people on the east side of the development." "Actually, Gary, I should probably tell you I'm not maintaining the trees anymore." His friendly expression faltered. "What do you mean?" "I mean I've canceled all the maintenance contracts. The trees are on my property. They cost me thousands of dollars a year to keep healthy, and the HOA just fined me $1,500 for snow on my land. So I'm done." Gary's face went through several emotional shifts. "But those trees protect all of us on Maple and Oak." "They do. But they're mine. I've been maintaining them out of pocket for 8 years. No one from the HOA or the neighborhood has ever contributed or even said thank you. Except you just now. But it's too late. I'm not paying for something that benefits people who fine me for weather." "Xavier, be reasonable. A lot of families live behind you." "I am being reasonable. I'm stopping unnecessary expenses on my property. If those families want wind protection, they can plant their own trees." "That would take decades." "Yes, it would. Good thing Dutch planted mine 40 years ago." Unfortunately, the current HOA board does not care about that kind of long-term thinking. They care about fining people for snow. Gary left looking troubled. I felt a small pang of guilt. Gary was a decent guy. But he was also on the HOA Architectural Review Committee, and he had not spoken up for me at the meeting. No one had. April arrived with the violent weather South Dakota is famous for. We got a late-season snowstorm that dumped 8 inches of heavy wet snow overnight, followed by winds that gusted to 50 miles per hour. I woke to find my property covered in fresh white drifts. I also woke to find another certified letter from the HOA. This one was even better than the first. Patricia Morrison was fining me $2,000 for repeated violations of property maintenance standards due to ongoing snow accumulation issues. The letter noted that I had been previously warned and fined, and that continued violations would result in escalating penalties. I called Tom Chen. "They fine you again for snow," he sounded incredulous, "after you already paid the first fine, $2,000 this time." "Okay, we're going to fight this. This is harassment at this point. Can you document the snow conditions on other properties?" "Sure, but most properties are small residential lots. Mine is 20 acres. Of course I have more snow." "Document it anyway. Take photos of everything. Also start taking photos of the condition of your trees. If you're not maintaining them anymore and they start declining, I want a record showing the timeline." I spent the afternoon driving through Meadowbrook Heights with my phone, photographing snow on every property I could see. Some had drifts, some did not. But none had the open space that my land had. Then I photographed my trees, focusing on areas where dead branches were already visible and where I knew beetle damage had been starting. That evening I got a phone call from a number I did not recognize. "Is this Xavier Lawson?" "Yes." "This is Linda Shaw. I live on Oak Avenue behind your property. I wanted to ask you about the rumor that you're not maintaining your windbreak anymore." "It's not a rumor. I stopped all maintenance programs last month." "Mr. Lawson, I don't know if you understand how important those trees are to us. My house took $10,000 in damage during a windstorm 5 years ago before I had the protection of your trees. I cannot afford to go through that again." "Mrs. Shaw, I understand your concern. But those are my trees on my property, and they cost me significant money to maintain. The HOA has made it clear they don't value my property management by fining me repeatedly for weather conditions, so I'm reducing my expenses. This is because of Patricia Morrison, is not it? She's insufferable. Everyone knows she has it out for the people with larger properties. She tried to fine the Hendersons last year for having a vegetable garden. I don't know about her personal motivations. I only know I'm tired of being harassed. What if we helped pay for the tree maintenance? The neighbors on Maple and Oak could pool money. That stopped me. How many houses are in that area? About 35 total that really benefit from the wind protection. The maintenance costs about $4,000 a year, plus I have about $2,000 in irrigation costs for the new saplings. That's roughly $200 per house if you split it evenly. Let me talk to people. Can you give us a few weeks, Mrs. Shaw? I'm not making any promises." "But sure, you can talk to people." She thanked me and hung up. I sat there wondering if I had just been played, but Linda Shaw had sounded genuinely worried, not manipulative. The next week, I received a notice that the HOA was taking me to arbitration over the unpaid fine. Tom Chen filed a response challenging the fine as unreasonable and not supported by the community guidelines. We were scheduled for a hearing in early May. In mid-April, Linda Shaw called me again. "Mr. Lawson, I've talked to 32 households on Maple and Oak. 28 are willing to contribute to a tree maintenance fund. Most can do $200. A few can only manage $100. The Patels at the corner said they could do 500 because they have the most exposure. What about the other 4 households? 2 are rentals and the owners live out of state. I left messages but have not heard back. The other 2 refused. One said it was your responsibility as the property owner. The other was just rude. Let me guess, Patricia Morrison was the rude one. Linda laughed bitterly. How did you know? She lives on Oak. Her backyard faces directly toward your windbreak, and she absolutely refused to contribute a penny. She said you were trying to extort the neighborhood. Of course she did. Mr. Lawson, we can collect about $5,000. Is that enough to restart the maintenance? I thought about it. The money was not really the point anymore, but these were people who had taken the time to organize and contribute to something that was, legally speaking, entirely my responsibility. That meant something. Tell you what, Mrs. Shaw, let me see how this arbitration hearing goes. If the HOA backs off, I'll consider taking the contribution and restarting maintenance. But if they keep coming after me, I'm not maintaining trees that benefit Patricia Morrison. That's fair. Thank you for considering it. The hearing was on a Thursday afternoon in a conference room at a lawyer's office in downtown Rapid City. Patricia Morrison showed up with Donald Hughes and the HOA's attorney, a tired-looking man named Richard Kemper. I brought Tom Chen. The arbitrator was a retired judge named Barbara Yates. She listened to both sides with a neutral expression. Richard Kemper went first, arguing that the HOA had a right and responsibility to maintain community standards, and that my property's appearance negatively impacted property values and violated multiple guideline provisions. Tom countered that the guidelines did not support fining anyone for natural snow accumulation, especially on a large rural property. He presented photos showing snow on many properties throughout Meadowbrook Heights. He also argued that the HOA was selectively enforcing vague standards to harass me. Judge Yates asked Patricia Morrison directly, "Mrs. Morrison, why is Mr. Lawson's property being singled out? I see snow on many properties in these photographs." Patricia straightened in her chair. "Mr. Lawson has by far the largest accumulation. His property is visible from Ridge Road, which is a main entrance to our community. It creates a poor first impression. Is there any provision in your guidelines about snow removal on undeveloped land?" The guidelines require all properties to maintain curb appeal and proper maintenance standards. That's quite vague. What specifically is Mr. Lawson supposed to do about wind-driven snow on open land? Patricia's lips pressed into a thin line. He could install fencing to control the drift patterns. He could bring in equipment to level the snow. He could improve his land management to prevent the accumulations. At what cost? That's not the HOA's concern. Property maintenance is the owner's responsibility. Judge Yates made some notes. Then she turned to me. "Mr. Lawson, is there a reason you have not addressed the HOA's concerns at all? Even minimal effort toward managing the snow might have prevented this situation." I leaned forward. "Your Honor, I own 20 acres on the edge of the development. It's former farmland. Snow blows onto it the same way snow blows onto every open field in South Dakota. I keep my driveway clear. I keep my walkways clear. I maintain my property. But I cannot control the weather, and I should not be fined for natural accumulation on undeveloped land. Why is the land undeveloped? Because I bought it that way and I like it that way. The property is zoned for agricultural use. There's nothing in the HOA guidelines requiring me to develop or landscape all 20 acres. Judge Yates nodded slowly. She asked several more questions, then called for a 30-minute recess to review the documents. During the break, Tom and I got coffee from a machine down the hall. "I think she's leaning our way," Tom said. Patricia hurt herself with that comment about fencing and equipment, expecting someone to spend thousands of dollars managing snow on farm land is absurd. What happens if we win? The fines get dropped. Possibly the HOA has to pay your legal fees, though that depends on how strongly Judge Yates rules. When we returned, Judge Yates delivered her decision. She ruled that the HOA's fines were not supported by the community guidelines and were unreasonable given the natural conditions and property characteristics. She ordered both fines vacated and required the HOA to pay my legal fees, which totaled $3,200. Patricia Morrison looked like she had bitten into a lemon. This is outrageous. The HOA has a duty to all residents. Judge Yates gave her a sharp look. Mrs. Morrison, the HOA has a duty to follow its own rules fairly and consistently. Fining someone for weather is not reasonable enforcement. This matter is closed. Outside, Tom shook my hand. Congratulations. Want to go get a real coffee to celebrate? Thanks, but I need to get home. I have some phone calls to make. I called Linda Shaw from my truck. Mrs. Shaw, the HOA dropped the fines. I'd like to accept the neighborhood's contribution and restart the tree maintenance. She let out a relieved breath. Oh, thank God. When can we get you the money? Whenever is convenient. But I want to set up a proper system. I'll create a separate account just for the windbreak maintenance. I'll send quarterly reports showing what the money is spent on. That way everyone knows their contributions are going to the trees. That's very professional, Mr. Lawson. Thank you. And Mrs. Shaw, I need you to understand something. I'm doing this because your neighbors stepped up and offered to help. That means something to me. But if the HOA comes after me again for bogus reasons, I'll stop the maintenance again, regardless of the contributions. I'm not going to keep helping people who actively work against me. I understand completely, and for what it is worth, a lot of us are getting tired of Patricia's power trips. There's talk of running opposition candidates for the board in the next election. That was interesting. When is the next election? October. 3 seats are up, including Patricia's. Well, good luck with that. Over the next 2 weeks, I collected checks from 28 households. Linda Shaw organized the whole thing, creating a spreadsheet and having people drop off contributions at her house. When she handed me a folder with all the checks and documentation, I was impressed by how thorough she had been. You're good at organizing, I told her. I'm a project manager for a construction company. Organization is literally my job. She was a woman in her 30s with short brown hair and a no-nonsense demeanor. Mr. Lawson, can I be frank with you? Sure. You should run for the HOA board. We need people who actually understand property management and who are not on weird power trips. I don't want anything to do with the HOA board. I get that. But think about it. You have a legitimate grievance, you have a platform, and you have the respect of at least 28 households now. That's nothing to dismiss. I thanked her for the suggestion but made no promises. The truth was, the idea of sitting through monthly board meetings with Patricia Morrison sounded like torture. I restarted all the tree maintenance contracts. The tree service was happy to have me back and scheduled an immediate assessment. Their report was concerning. In just the 2 months without treatment, the beetle infestation in the northern section had spread significantly. We would need aggressive intervention to prevent losing several trees. This is going to cost extra, the foreman told me. We're talking about injections and possibly removing 2 trees that are too far gone. Do what needs to be done. The work cost $6,800. Even with the neighborhood contributions, I was still out of pocket, but I had made a commitment, May turn to June. The snow was long gone. My property looked green and alive. The trees were being treated. I thought maybe things would settle down. Then I got another letter from the HOA. This one informed me that I was in violation of Section 8.2 of the Community Guidelines for maintaining an agricultural property within a residential development. According to Patricia Morrison, my 20 acres of open land constituted a farm, and farms were not permitted in Meadowbrook Heights. I read the letter 3 times, unable to believe what I was seeing. I called Tom Chen. They're saying my property is an illegal farm. What are you farming? Nothing. It's just open land, grass, trees on the borders. Send me the letter. An hour later, Tom called back. He was not laughing, but I could hear the disbelief in his voice. Xavier, this is insane. Your property is zoned agricultural, which means you could farm it if you wanted to. But nothing in the HOA guidelines prohibits agricultural zoning. In fact, several properties in Meadowbrook Heights have agricultural zoning for tax purposes. So what is she doing? She's harassing you. This is retaliation for the arbitration. We need to respond firmly. Tom sent a letter to the HOA informing them that any further baseless complaints or fines would result in a harassment lawsuit. He cited the arbitration ruling and pointed out that targeted enforcement constituted discrimination. I also decided to take Linda Shaw's suggestion seriously. I looked up the HOA bylaws and election procedures. To run for the board, I needed to be nominated by at least 5 homeowners and submit my candidacy by August 1st. The election would be held in October, with results announced at the annual meeting. I called Linda. If I run for the board, will you nominate me? Absolutely. I'll get you 10 nominations. I only need 5. I'll get you 20. Trust me, people are ready for a change. Over the next few weeks, I talked to more of my neighbors. I discovered that Patricia Morrison had been irritating people for years. She had fined a family for having the wrong shade of yellow on their front door. She had tried to ban basketball hoops. She had sent violation notices to people whose grass was a 1/4 inch too long. The woman was a one-person tyranny. Gary, my neighbor who had initially complained about the tree maintenance, came by to apologize. Xavier, I did not realize how bad things had gotten with Patricia. I'm sorry I did not speak up for you at that first meeting. If you run for the board, you have my vote. I appreciate that, Gary. Are you really going to run? I'm thinking about it. Do it. We need someone who actually cares about this community, not someone who wants to be a petty dictator. By mid-July, Linda had collected 43 signatures nominating me for the board. I submitted my candidacy along with a statement explaining my platform: reasonable enforcement of guidelines, transparency in decision-making, and respect for property owners' rights. Patricia Morrison filed to run for re-election. So did Donald Hughes. The other open seat was held by a quiet man named Peter Walsh, who decided not to run again, saying he was moving out of state. 4 other people filed to run: Linda Shaw, a retired teacher named Margaret Fuller, a young engineer named Akash Patel, the same Patel family that had contributed $500 to the tree fund, and a real estate agent named Susan Chen, who was Tom's sister-in-law. The campaign season was surprisingly intense for an HOA election. Patricia Morrison sent out glossy mailers talking about her proven leadership and commitment to community standards. She did not mention the failed fines or the arbitration she had lost. I kept my campaign simple. I went door to door talking to people. I listened to their concerns. I learned that the biggest complaints were about the HOA's inconsistent enforcement, lack of financial transparency, and poor communication. People felt like the board operated in secret and only reached out to homeowners when issuing fines. Linda ran on a platform of community engagement and fiscal responsibility. Akash focused on modernizing the HOA's infrastructure and communications. Margaret wanted better maintenance of common areas. Susan emphasized property values and professional management. In August, the HOA held a candidates forum at the community center. About 60 people showed up, which was apparently a record. Patricia spoke first, delivering a prepared speech about maintaining excellence and standards. She talked about property values and curb appeal. She did not take questions. When it was my turn, I skipped the prepared remarks I had written. Most of you know who I am. I'm the guy with the 20 acres and the windbreak trees. I'm the guy Patricia fined for snow. I'm also the guy who has spent 8 years and thousands of dollars maintaining trees that protect 35 of your homes from wind damage, without asking for anything in return. I did not want to be involved in HOA politics. But after being harassed with baseless fines and dealing with a board that seems more interested in power than community, I decided someone needed to provide an alternative. If you elect me, I will fight for fair enforcement, transparent budgets, and treating homeowners with respect. That's it. That's my pitch. The applause was substantial. Patricia's expression could have curdled milk. During the question period, someone asked about the tree maintenance fund. Mr. Lawson, is it true that neighbors are paying you to maintain your trees? Yes. 28 households on Maple and Oak voluntarily contribute to cover the costs of maintaining the windbreak that protects their properties. I maintain a separate account for that money and provide quarterly reports showing exactly what it's spent on. The latest report showed $6,800 spent on beetle treatment and tree removal. Every penny of the contributions goes to tree maintenance, not to me personally. Why should they have to pay? Aren't those your trees? They are my trees on my property. No one has to pay anything. But maintenance costs about $6,000 a year. The neighbors who benefit chose to contribute rather than risk losing the wind protection. I think it's a good example of community cooperation. Patricia jumped in. It's a protection racket. He's extorting neighbors by threatening to let the trees die. The room went quiet. I took a breath and kept my voice level. Mrs. Morrison, I maintained those trees for 8 years without asking for a penny from anyone. I only stopped maintenance after you fined me $1,500 for weather conditions on my property. The neighbors approached me, not the other way around. If anyone has been using threats and coercion, it's the HOA board under your leadership. The applause this time was even louder. Patricia's face flushed red. The forum continued for another hour. Linda gave a great presentation about improving communication. Akash talked about setting up an online portal for homeowners. Margaret discussed playground improvements. Susan focused on marketing the community to potential buyers. Donald Hughes mostly echoed Patricia's talking points. He was clearly her loyalist. As people filed out, dozens stopped to shake my hand or express support. A few were more cautious, saying they appreciated Patricia's strong leadership even if she was sometimes harsh. But the overall energy felt positive. September arrived with cooler weather and changing leaves. The trees on my property looked healthy again, the beetle treatment having worked. I took photos for the quarterly report to the contributing neighbors. Patricia made one more attempt to cause problems. She filed a complaint with the county zoning office claiming I was operating an illegal business by accepting money for tree maintenance. The county investigator came out, looked at my documentation, and closed the complaint within a week. Mr. Lawson, you're not running a business. You're accepting voluntary contributions for property maintenance. That's completely legal. I have to say, this complaint seems frivolous. It is frivolous. The person who filed it is retaliating against me for running against her in the HOA election. The investigator shook his head. Politics. I'll note in my report that the complaint appears to be harassment. If she files again, it could be considered abuse of the system. I thanked him and immediately sent an email to all the homeowners who had nominated me, explaining what Patricia had done. Linda Shaw forwarded it to her entire contact list. By evening, it had spread through half the development. The next morning, I got a call from Donald Hughes. Xavier, this is Don Hughes from the HOA board. I wanted to reach out personally. What do you want, Don? Look, I know there has been tension between you and Patricia, but we're all on the same team here. We all want what's best for Meadowbrook Heights. Are we on the same team? Because Patricia has spent 6 months trying to find me, harass me, and interfere with my property rights. That does not feel like teamwork. Patricia can be intense, but her heart is in the right place. She cares deeply about this community. Don, why are you calling me? There was a pause. We're worried that this election is becoming too divisive. Maybe we could come to an understanding. If you withdrew your candidacy, the board would commit to leaving you alone. No more complaints, no more scrutiny. Are you seriously trying to make a deal with me right now? I'm trying to find a path forward that works for everyone. Here is the path forward, Don. There will be an election in October. The homeowners will vote. If I win, I'll serve on the board and work to fix the things that are broken. If I lose, I'll accept the results and move on. But I'm not making backroom deals with people who have been harassing me. Xavier, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. What you're suggesting is not reasonable. It's borderline corrupt. I hung up. Then I called Tom Chen and told him about the conversation. That's interesting, Tom said. They're worried. You should document that call in case they try to claim something different later. I wrote up a detailed summary and emailed it to myself and Tom for timestamp purposes. October arrived with beautiful fall weather. The election was scheduled for the 3rd Thursday of the month, with voting conducted by mail-in ballot. The ballots went out on October 1st with a return deadline of October 15th. The tension in Meadowbrook Heights was palpable. You could tell who supported whom by the conversations at the community mailboxes and the cold shoulders in the grocery store. Patricia sent out a last-minute mailer that was shockingly negative. It accused me of being anti-community and attempting to undermine property values. It claimed I had bullied neighbors into paying protection money and was unfit for leadership. Linda Shaw organized a response. She and 15 other contributors to the Tree Fund signed a letter explaining exactly what had happened and praising my integrity. They distributed it to every house in the development. Margaret Fuller, the retired teacher running for the 3rd seat, also spoke up. She sent out an email stating that Patricia's mailer was dishonest and offensive, and that she would not serve on a board with Patricia if they were both elected. On October 15th, the ballots were due. On October 16th, the election committee, which did not include any candidates, counted the votes. The results would be announced at the annual meeting on October 20th. That meeting was packed. Over 100 homeowners showed up, nearly double the usual attendance. The current board sat at their table looking tense. Patricia wore another blazer, this one forest green, and kept her expression carefully neutral. The HOA president, a largely powerless figurehead named Robert Kim, read through the standard annual report. Budgets, maintenance projects, upcoming initiatives. No one was really listening. Everyone was waiting for the election results. Finally, Robert picked up a sealed envelope. Now we'll announce the results of the board election. 3 seats were open. We had 7 candidates, and received 238 ballots out of 312 eligible voters. That was a 76% turnout, incredible for an HOA election. Robert opened the envelope and read. For the 3-year term, the top 3 vote-getters are Xavier Lawson with 189 votes, Linda Shaw with 173 votes, and Margaret Fuller with 158 votes. The room erupted in applause. I felt a wave of relief and satisfaction. Patricia Morrison sat frozen in her seat. Donald Hughes looked stunned. Robert continued. Patricia Morrison received 91 votes. Donald Hughes received 122 votes and will continue in his current term. Akash Patel received 137 votes. Susan Chen received 109 votes. Akash had come close but not quite made it. I made a note to talk to him about getting involved in committees. The meeting continued with the transition process. Patricia would serve out the remainder of her term, which ended that night. The new board would take over immediately. Linda, Margaret, and I would join Donald and the 5th board member, a quiet accountant named Karen Price, whose term continued for another year. After the formal business concluded, people crowded around to congratulate us. Patricia and Donald left quickly without speaking to anyone. The new board held our first meeting the following week. We elected officers. Linda became president, I became vice president, and Margaret became secretary. Karen stayed on as treasurer, which made sense given her financial background. Donald voted against everything, but was consistently outvoted. Our first major action was to review all outstanding fines and violations. We found dozens of cases where enforcement had been inconsistent or unreasonable. We dismissed about 40% of them outright and reduced many others. We also implemented a new policy requiring board approval before any fine over $500 could be issued, and we created an appeal process that did not require a fee. We also commissioned a full audit of HOA finances. Patricia had been treasurer for 3 years before becoming president, and we wanted to make sure everything was in order. The audit took 6 weeks. In early December, the auditor presented his findings. He had found several irregularities, nothing massive but concerning. Patricia had approved about $15,000 in consulting fees to a company owned by her sister. The consulting work was poorly documented. She had also been reimbursing herself for various expenses without proper receipts. It was not clear-cut embezzlement, but it was definitely inappropriate and possibly fraudulent. Linda called an emergency board meeting. We invited Patricia to attend and answer questions. She declined. We then voted unanimously to refer the matter to law enforcement and to file a civil suit to recover the questionable expenditures. The Pennington County Sheriff's Office sent a detective to interview us. Detective Sarah Morrison, no relation to Patricia, thankfully, reviewed the audit and all our documentation. "This is borderline," she said. "The dollar amounts are not huge, and some of this could be explained as sloppy bookkeeping rather than intentional theft. But there are some red flags. We'll investigate." The investigation took months. During that time, Patricia Morrison kept a very low profile. Her house went up for sale in January. In March, Detective Morrison called Linda. "We're bringing charges. 2 counts of theft by deception and 1 count of fraudulent billing. The dollar amount is just over $18,000 once we traced everything. It's a Class 5 felony." Patricia was arrested on a Tuesday morning. It made the local news. The headline read, "Former HOA President Charged with Embezzlement." The criminal case moved slowly through the system. Patricia pleaded not guilty and hired a lawyer who tried to characterize everything as misunderstandings. But the audit was thorough and the evidence was solid. In August, Facing a trial she would likely lose, Patricia took a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to 1 count of theft and was sentenced to 2 years of probation, 200 hours of community service, and full restitution of $18,462 to the HOA. The civil suit settled shortly after. Patricia's homeowner's insurance covered most of the restitution, and she agreed to pay the remainder over time. By the time everything was resolved, Patricia and her husband had moved to Arizona. Good riddance. Meanwhile, life in Meadowbrook Heights improved considerably. The new board focused on actual community building rather than nitpicking enforcement. We organized neighborhood events. We improved the playgrounds. We created an online portal so homeowners could track budgets and submit maintenance requests. Donald Hughes resigned from the board in February, citing personal reasons. Akash Patel was appointed to fill his seat and quickly became one of our most valuable members. The tree maintenance fund continued. We formalized it into a proper neighborhood association with bylaws and elected officers. Linda Shaw became president of that too, because apparently she could not help herself. The fund now had 42 contributing households and covered not just my windbreak, but also several other community beautification projects. On a warm day in May, almost 18 months after that first ridiculous fine for snow, I stood at the edge of my property looking at the windbreak trees. They were healthy and full, their branches thick with new growth. Behind them, the houses on maple and oak sat safe from the prairie winds. My phone rang. It was Gary, my neighbor. "Hey Xavier, a bunch of us are grilling out this weekend. You should come by. I'll be there. And bring that potato salad you made for the 4th of July thing. That was amazing." I laughed. "Sure, I can do that." After we hung up, I walked along the tree line, checking the irrigation system and looking for any signs of disease or damage. Everything looked good. The trees Dutch had planted 40 years ago were thriving. The saplings I had added were establishing well. In another 10 years, they would be substantial barriers in their own right. I thought about how close I had come to letting all this die out of spite. How the petty tyranny of one person had almost destroyed something valuable that had taken decades to build. But the community had stepped up. Good people had organized, and in the end, common sense had prevailed. That did not always happen. I knew I had been lucky. Lucky to have neighbors like Linda and Gary. Lucky to have a good lawyer like Tom. Lucky that the system, slow and frustrating as it was, had eventually worked. I went back to my house and sat on the porch with a beer, watching the evening light turn the trees golden. My phone buzzed with a text from Linda. "Board meeting Thursday. Can you review the pool renovation bids before then?" I typed back. "Will do." It was not the retirement from HOA involvement I had once imagined. But it was better than the alternative. Better to be at the table making decisions than to be on the receiving end of arbitrary fines from someone on a power trip. The wind picked up, and I listened to it whistle through the trees. A few years ago, that sound would have been terrifying to my neighbors on maple and oak. Now it was just background music. I raised my beer in a silent toast to Dutch, wherever he was. He had planted those trees knowing he would never see their full benefit. He had done it anyway. That was the kind of long-term thinking communities needed. The next morning, I reviewed the pool renovation bids. 3 companies had submitted proposals, ranging from $60,000 to $95,000. I made notes on each one, checking references and comparing scope of work. Thursday's board meeting was productive. We approved the mid-range bid and set a timeline for construction to begin in June. We discussed several maintenance issues. We reviewed a complaint about a barking dog and handled it with a polite letter asking the owner to address the issue before any fine was considered. It was boring, practical work. Exactly what HOA governance should be. After the meeting, Akash pulled me aside. "Xavier, I wanted to thank you for suggesting me for Donald's seat. This has been a good experience. You're doing great work. The website redesign is fantastic. I enjoy it, and it is nice to be part of something that actually functions. My last HOA in Denver was a disaster." What made it a disaster? People like Patricia. Petty tyrants who cared more about control than community. I almost did not buy in Meadowbrook because of HOA horror stories. I am glad I did, though. This place is different now. We are working on keeping it that way. I drove home through the quiet streets, past well-maintained houses and neat lawns. It was a nice community. Imperfect, like anywhere else, but trying to do better. That was all you could really ask for. The following week, I hosted the neighborhood barbecue at my place. About 30 people showed up, spreading across my yard and enjoying the space. Kids ran around playing tag. Adults stood in clusters talking and laughing. Someone set up a volleyball net. It was chaotic and noisy and wonderful. Linda found me at the grill flipping burgers. "This is great, Xavier. We should make it an annual thing." "Maybe. We will see how much cleanup there is first," she laughed. "Fair point. Hey, I heard from the Hendersons that they want to join the tree fund. That will be 43 households. That is fantastic. The more people involved, the better." You know what is funny? Patricia's house backing onto your trees benefited from them more than almost anyone else's, and she never contributed a penny, never even said thank you. Some people do not know how to appreciate what they have until it is gone. Profound and true. Gary came over with a plate piled high with food. "Xavier, this is amazing. We should do this monthly. Let us not get carried away." "I am serious. Maybe not monthly, but quarterly. A big neighborhood gathering at different locations. Build community." Linda's eyes lit up. "That is a great idea. I will add it to the agenda for next board meeting." I groaned. "You two are relentless." "That is why things get done," Linda said. The party continued into the evening. As the sun set, someone started a fire in my fire pit and people gathered around it. Stories were shared. Jokes were told. It felt like a real community, not just a collection of houses bound by restrictive covenants. Around 10, people started heading home. I walked Linda to her car. "Thank you for everything," I said. "If you had not pushed me to run for the board, none of this would have happened." "You did the work, Xavier. I just pointed you in the right direction. And honestly, you saved this place." Another few years of Patricia's leadership and Meadowbrook Heights would have been unbearable. It was a team effort. It was. That is what makes it meaningful. After everyone left, I spent an hour cleaning up. The yard was a mess, but it was a good mess. Evidence of life and community. I fell into bed exhausted and content. My phone showed a text from Tom Chen. "Heard the party was great. Sorry I missed it. Dinner next week," I replied. "Sounds good. Let me know when." Sleep came easily. The months that followed settled into a comfortable rhythm. The HOA board met monthly. We handled the routine business of running a community association. There were occasional disputes, but nothing like the Patricia Morrison era. We approached problems with reason and fairness, and most issues resolved themselves. The windbreak trees continued to thrive. The beetle problem was fully under control. The saplings were growing strong. I took pride in maintaining them, and the quarterly reports to the contributors became something I actually enjoyed preparing. In September, a year after our election, the HOA held another annual meeting. Attendance was much lower than the previous year, maybe 40 people. That was actually a good sign. People were not feeling the need to show up and fight. They trusted the board to handle things. We presented the annual budget, which showed the HOA in solid financial shape. The pool renovation had come in under budget. Maintenance costs were down because we were being smarter about contracts. We had even built up a healthy reserve fund. During the open comment period, a newer resident stood up. "I just wanted to say thank you to the board. I moved here 6 months ago, and this is the best-run HOA I have ever been part of. You are responsive, fair, and transparent. It is appreciated." Several people applauded. Linda, sitting next to me at the board table, smiled. After the meeting, as we were putting away chairs, Margaret said, "You know what I realized? We have not issued a fine in 4 months. Really? I had not been tracking it, really. We have sent a few warning letters about minor issues, but nothing required a fine. People are just handling things." "That is how it should work," Linda said. "Most people want to do the right thing. They just need clear communication and reasonable standards." Karen, our treasurer, added, "And when we do have to fine someone, it is for legitimate safety issues or clear violations, not because someone had an extra inch of grass or some snow on their property." We all laughed at that. The snow fine seemed like ancient history now, though it had only been 18 months. As I drove home that night, I thought about how much had changed. I had gone from a homeowner who wanted nothing to do with the HOA to an active board member. I had gone from considering legal action against the association to helping lead it. Life was strange, but it was good strange. I had made real friends. I had helped improve my community. And I had learned that sometimes fighting back against injustice meant getting involved and doing the work to create something better. The windbreak trees stood tall in the moonlight as I pulled into my driveway. 40 years old and still protecting the neighborhood. Dutch would have been proud. I went inside, poured myself a drink, and sat by the window looking out at my property. 20 acres of grass and trees and open space. Room to breathe. Room to think. My phone buzzed. A message from Linda in the board group chat. "Great meeting tonight, everyone. Thanks for all your work this year." Margaret replied. "Pleasure working with you all," Akash added. "Same, this is what good governance looks like." Karen sent a thumbs-up emoji. I typed, "Agreed, see you next month." Simple, professional, a functional board doing functional work. Nothing dramatic or noteworthy. Exactly as it should be. I finished my drink and headed to bed. Tomorrow I had a tree service appointment to check on the windbreak. The quarterly inspections had become routine, but I never skipped them. Some things were worth the effort. As I drifted off to sleep, I thought about Patricia Morrison in Arizona, probably finding some new group of people to irritate. Some people never learned. But most people were decent. Most people, given clear expectations and fair treatment, would contribute to their community. That was the lesson I had learned from this whole mess. Do not let the Patricia Morrisons of the world define your experience. Stand up to them. Organize against them. Build something better and maintain your windbreak trees. You never know who might be depending on them.